Amy Coney Barrett, who I will be referring to with a nickname shortly. I mean, I still haven't decided. Amy Waffle Coney Barrett. I could call her like Waffle Coney, or I could go with Coney Island, Amy Coney Island Barrett. I haven't settled on which one I'm going to do. I've just been throwing it all out there, like in tweets and stuff. I call her Amy Waffle Coney Island Barrett. I know it's weird, but I'm a child. I might go with Waffle Coney. It's just like, it just works. So anyway, Amy Coney Barrett / Waffle Coney her hearing is starting. She's, potentially going to fill Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat since Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. And her opening statement was released actually before the hearing. The hearing is going on as I'm talking to you right now, but we knew what her opening statement was going to be beforehand. And I want to talk about a part that was highlighted by the media. So Amy Coney Barrett's opening statement, notable line, quote, "The policy decisions and value judgments of government must be made by the political branches elected by and accountable to the people. The public should not expect courts to do so, and courts should not try." So let me decode that for everybody. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and perhaps you don't need the decoding, but I'll go ahead and do it anyway. What she's saying is, the legislative branch, their job is to legislate. Their job is to come up with policies and laws and implement them. The judicial branch, that is not our job. Our job is not to do policy making. Our job is not to do legislation. So I'm not going to do that, and you shouldn't expect me or the court system to ever do that. So this is a line that you hear all the time from right-wing judges, left-wing judges. It's this idea that, hey, we're the branch of government that's above the fray. We're just calling balls and strikes. We're not creating new laws or anything like that. And really what we are is neutral. Really what we are is apolitical. We're objective. And you can depend on that. You can rely on that. In other words, we're not going to be activist judges. Now, again, this is a very common argument that you hear from, and there's a school of thought called Originalism. There's also textualism, similar thing. The idea is, hey, the founder said X, Y, and Z. So I'm here to enforce X, Y, and Z. That's it. Nothing beyond that. I'm going to interpret the Constitution as originally intended. That's my job. This is what she's saying. This is the right-wing judicial philosophy, at least in theory. But here's why we're talking about this today. Because it's total nonsense. It's total nonsense. I'm not saying that this is the theory that she abides by and the theory is wrong. My point is, nobody actually abides by that theory. So in other words, even the most hardcore originalist or textualist technically believes in the other theory, which is the living document theory, which means people interpret the Constitution in a way where you have to determine what's allowed and what's not allowed under the Constitution, and there's always going to be room for interpretation, and there's always going to be gray areas, because the founders could not and did not cover everything. So what do you do if it's an issue nominally where they didn't really weigh in on it, and they couldn't have even known about it, like something involving computers, for example? What do? Nobody's an originalist, nobody's a textualist, because they didn't say anything on it. So everybody believes in a living document to one extent or another. And the other point is, guys, everything is political. Everything is. So when you have Amy Coney Barrett or anybody, Waffle Coney, saying, I'm not political, of course you are, because everything is political. Even if you make a decision that in your mind you're convinced, no, seriously, this is not political. It is political. Of course it is. So don't fall for the ruse of the objective judge. Antonin Scalia used to do this all the time. So his line was, who, me, bro? I never let my opinion get in the way. I can't let my opinion get in the way. I'm above that. I'm better than that. And so what I do is I take my personal beliefs and I put them aside, and I just go by what the Constitution says, the letter of the law, what the founders intended. That's always what I do. And a lot of people believe this line of garbage that this snake oil salesman is selling, when any look at his record, even just a quick glance at his record, immediately shows that's of course not what he did, and it's not even possible to do that. So in the case of Antonin Scalia, a great example of this is part of the right-wing judicial philosophy is states' rights. They always harp away on states' rights. So the federal government's got to be like weak and small and delegate powers more to the states to let them make their own decisions. Well, Antonin Scalia, are there cases where he sided with states' rights? Absolutely. There was a case involving immigration. I believe it was in Arizona, but I could be wrong on the state. And they were saying, hey, we don't think the federal government is doing a good job enforcing the border. So us, the state of Arizona, we are going to enforce border policy. We're going to make our own border policy. We're going to patrol it. We're going to, maybe build our own wall, whatever it might be. Antonin Scalia said, of course they should be allowed to do that. Why shouldn't they be allowed to do that? If you're taking away their ability to do that, they're not even a state. They're not even a free state. They're subject to the tyrannical whims of the federal government. You got to let them live as they want to live. States are the laboratories of democracy, and so of course they can determine what's going on with their own border. That's what he said in that case. Then there was another case involving state legalization of marijuana. Would you like to take a guess the position Antonin Scalia took on that one? He said, no, states' rights are irrelevant. We have the supremacy clause of the Constitution, which says federal law overrides state laws. So the federal government says you're not allowed to legalize weed in the states. So guess what? You're not allowed to legalize weed in the state. It might have been for California, I think, for that one, although I could be wrong about that too. So sorry, I'm siding with the federal government and against states' rights. So in other words, the dude who says, my opinion doesn't even get in the way, bro. Of course it does. It got in the way all the time. If you agreed with the federal government, you would side with the federal government over the states. If you agreed with the states on the issue, you would side with the states over the federal government. There's no apolitical, neutral, above the fray, holier than thou thing going on here. Everything is political. And then they just rationalize backwards from whatever their opinion is. They rationalize backwards using legal texts to say, see, this is the direction we're going to go in. So I'm just so sick because it's so disingenuous. And I don't just mean it on right-wing judges, because a lot of left-wing judges would say similar things. Like, just stop pretending that you're holier than thou and you're just by the book and the letter of the law. Almost nothing is clear in the letter of the law anyway, especially in the Constitution. So there's always going to be, reading between the lines, trying to interpret something, and there's reasonable disagreement about how to interpret it. So let's just be honest about everything. It's like this is a point that Glenn Greenwald has made for a long time, and I feel like earlier on I didn't agree with it as much. Now I pretty much totally agree with it. He says, listen, if you're a journalist, we all have biases, we all have beliefs, we all have opinions. The difference is some people are honest enough to tell you what those are up front. And other people hide it and pretend like they don't have the opinions. And then he says, I think everybody who's in journalism should basically tell you everything they believe up front, so you know where they're coming from. Instead of playing this game of fake objectivity, because you're not objective. Nobody's objective. That's his point. And again, now I definitely feel like this, especially when it comes to judges. I hate this tap dance of where they all have to pretend our job is not to make the laws. That's Congress's job. So we're not gonna get involved. We're not gonna be activist judges. Of course you are. If you strike down a law and say it's unconstitutional, that's political. If you uphold a law and say it is constitutional, that's political. Just be honest about that. That you're always gonna be getting involved in policy making. You are. It's just policy making through a different avenue. That's it. That's all it is. Determining the constitutionality of something is still policymaking, because you have the ability to slap a bunch of stuff down and uphold other things. So It's just, this is total bullshit, and I hate that people, like the media uncritically said this and held it up as like, look at this reasonable thing that this reasonable person is saying. But it's not true. It's total nonsense. Or can we talk about that? No, you can't. Of course not. That's why you come here, to have this conversation. But, if you are honest, then you get borked. Robert Bork was a little too honest, and then he was, basically not allowed on the court. And now I'm happy he didn't get on the court, but the reason I'm happy is because he's a right-wing lunatic. It's not the honesty that I'm against, it's the right-wing lunacy that I'm against. But yeah, I feel like everybody should be more honest about this. That everybody is a mix of like originalism and living document philosophy. Everybody's a mix. And it's really just a matter of people use legal rationalizations to back up what they think is the most reasonable position because they personally have come to that conclusion based on whatever they've experienced and seen and read. So, Waffle Coney is probably going to get on the court, and then if the Democrats don't pack it, I can't tell you how much damage will be done over time.